Summary of performance and notice of graduation. The learning objectives for this session include: participants will understand the function of the two types of forms for completing the summary of performance. Participants will also gain knowledge on the law governing summary of performance and notice of graduation and what is needed to satisfy this requirement. DPI's Form P3 is used to provide the parent and the student with notice of graduation with a regular high school diploma and to provide the student a summary of academic achievement and functional performance. Graduation from high school with a regular diploma ends a student's eligibility for special education and related services and is a change of placement requiring written prior notice. A regular high school diploma does not include an alternative degree that is not fully aligned with the state's academic standards. Receipt of a high school equivalency diploma, or an HSED, does not end a student's eligibility for special education services. Students who do not graduate with a regular high school diploma continue to have a right to a free and appropriate public education, FAPE, until the end of the school term in which they turn 21. DPI Form P4 is used when a student is aging out of the school system. IDEA requires the school to provide a summary of academic achievement and functional performance. The summary of performance, or SOP, should include recommendations about ways to help the student meet post-secondary goals. The summary of performance must be completed during the final year of high school. It is most useful when completed during the transition IEP process when the student has the opportunity to actively participate in the development of this summary. The SOP should contain the most updated information on academic achievement and performance and include abilities and aspirations. The information in the summary of performance should be based on a student's unique needs and goals after graduation from high school. Although IDEA does not spell out specifically what the SOP must contain. The intent of this document is to provide crucial information to those people who may assist the student in the future. The summary document, SOP, is required upon the student's graduation with a regular diploma or age out from special education services. However, as best practice, educators could choose to prepare an SOP earlier for students who are either transferring to another school, meeting with a disability coordinator at a college, or applying for DVR services. Since the intent of the SOP is to provide crucial information to those people who may assist the student in the future, providing that information when it's most timely makes sense. When a child graduates from high school with a regular diploma or ages out of special education, or earns an HSED and receives a high school diploma, these students all require a completed summary of performance. Dropouts are not required to receive one. This is a view of the DPI P-3 form. A lesson has been created for teachers to use that can be found on the TIG website. Go to www.witig.org and select the Wisconsin Self-Directed Transition Planning and then Lesson 15. There you will find a lesson plan starter that can be used to teach students how to assist with completing the summary of performance documentation. On the TIG website, you can also find the Effective Practice Summary of Performance form. It does look significantly different than the P3 form. The revisions were made using survey results and with the collaboration of a summary of performance work group consisting of representatives from high schools, higher education disability services, DVR, ADRCs, and parent organizations. Page 1 provides demographic information as well as suggestions of supplemental reports that might be attached to the summary of performance to provide further detail on necessary information. Just a reminder, The summary of performance alone does not provide sufficient documentation of disability for eligibility under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA is what determines eligibility when a student transitions from high school to their adult life. Let's talk first about what needs to be included in an effective practice summary of academic achievement. It should include both grade level and a skill description of the student's achievement in the areas of English language arts and in math. The student's skills should be summarized according to where the student wants to go after high school, as discussed in his or her measurable post-secondary goals. For instance, if the student plans to go on to post-secondary school, be sure to include pertinent information on college prep courses, necessary assistive tech accommodations, or etc. Include statements as to how the student's disability impacts these academic areas. For example, a student with a physical disability involving their hands may have limited skills in written expression and may require assistive technology to communicate in writing. Finally, including information as to what interventions or accommodations were necessary for the student to achieve the grade level that they have achieved. Can the student do algebra only with the assistance of a calculator and needs additional time on tests? Page 2 of the Summary of Performance Effective Practice form consists of the summary of academic achievement. The academic areas of language arts and math and the focus of the summary of academic achievement. For each area listed in the far left column, provide a grade level or appropriate test score and description of skills. It is important to include strengths and challenges in your description. In the third column, provide information relating to the impact the student's disability has on performance in each area. If academic skills in a particular area are not impacted by the student's disability, such that the student achieves at grade level with no accommodations, make a statement to that effect. In the far right column, list the accommodations, assistive technology, and supports that have been used by and proven effective for the student. Then state the impact that the accommodation, assistive technology, or support has had on the student's skills in that academic area. Below the chart, address whether the student receives accommodations on standardized tests while in high school. If so, please describe the accommodations that the student received in the space provided. Definitions of accommodations, modifications, assistive technology, and supports are also provided as a reference. Part 3 of the Summary of Performance is the Functional Performance section. In the left column are areas to consider for the Summary of Functional Performance. Check the box next to each area you will be providing information about. It may not be appropriate to address every area for every student. In the second column, provide a description of the student's skills in the areas you've checked. It is important to address both strengths and challenges in the areas addressed. In the third column, describe how the student's disability impacts functioning in the performance area, if applicable. In the final column, list the accommodations, assistive technology, and supports that the student has used and has determined effective in the areas you've addressed. Then provide a statement of the impact that the items you have listed have had on the student's skills. To complete Part 4 of the Summary Performance form, the recommendations, complete the following steps. Step 1. Consider the accommodations, assistive technology, etc. used by the student while he or she was in high school. Which of these should follow the student into the post-secondary environment? Those necessary accommodations, assistive technology, strategies, and support services should be listed in the middle column on Part 4. Step 2. It is recommended that the student make contact with providers of services. List their contact information in the far right column. If the summary of performance is completed at the time the student is applying for services, it may be necessary to list these contacts for future reference. Step 3. It is critical that students, teachers, and parents are aware of accommodations that are typically provided in post-secondary settings and those that are not. It is important for students with disabilities to not be dependent on accommodations that will not be permitted at the post-secondary level. Summary of functional performance. Select the areas of functional performance you plan to address. Provide a description of skills for each area you have selected. Does the student's disability impact performance in each area? If so, how? What accommodations, assistive technology, and supports were necessary for the student to achieve the skills stated? Finally, look at student input. Students with disabilities have input in creating this best practice form, and from their suggestions, the student perspective was added. Take time to meet with your student and review their answers to these questions. Their responses can assist DVR and other agencies in understanding the student's strengths and needs because it is in the student's own words. Part 5 of the Summary of Performance form includes questions for the student to address. These questions relate to basic self-advocacy skills that the student should be able to demonstrate when requesting services. These questions could be used by the student on a yearly basis as part of the IEP process. The Wisconsin Technical College System recently updated their guidelines on accommodations for students with disabilities. Although this guidebook is written with the Wisconsin Technical College System staff in mind, it can be very helpful for teachers in the K-12 system as a resource to see what types of strategies and accommodations are recommended for use at the post-secondary level. Documentation of disability assists post-secondary institutions in making a decision about disability eligibility at the post-secondary level. Just because a student was identified as having a disability and was allowed accommodations and modifications during high school doesn't mean that they're automatically qualifying for services as an adult under ADA. Only the Disability Support Office at the secondary level can make the disability determination utilizing the guidelines of ADA and Section 504 of the Rehab Act and the disability documentation provided to them by the student. The student will need written documentation of his or her disability, and it is helpful if it is attached to the summary of performance. You may need to contact the Disability Support Office at the post-secondary education institution to find out exactly what information they need from you to determine eligibility. Key points to remember. 1. Disability support offices at the post-secondary level will continue to make eligibility decisions on a case-by-case basis. 2. Disability support offices at the post-secondary level are advocating for the potential student to contact them for specific documentation needs, early disability determination, and planning for accommodations. And 3, disability support offices at the post-secondary level find it beneficial to include both primary and secondary disabilities with the student's disability documentation.